Oh no, I'm just following your lead and oh, okay.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, we're back. Um, we're troubleshooting some video stuff, and I've been thinking. I mean, it's interesting. Like, I feel like the hero's journey is something I really believe in because it's something I have to practice. Um, so there are moments in the creative process where, like, you know what I mean? Like, you're trying to focus on this project, or you're trying to do your best and be excellent at something, and then, like the condenser goes on there out on the refrigerator, you know what I mean? Or like your dog's walking around with a dead chipmunk
Yeah.
in his mouth, and you realize, like, oh my goodness, like we forgot to pay our taxes on, like, property or whatever, and like there's just this kind of constant stuff, and it becomes kind of exhausting. And that, for me, I a lot of times I have to, like, remind myself, like, there is we're not just doing this to make great art. I feel real strongly about this. Like, if the point of writing is to just make great novels, then forget about it. It's pointless, you know? Um, like, I think about Mary Ruefle, like in one of her essays, she says, like, one of her greatest fears is that she's consecrated her life to an imbecility, and in as a poet. Um, and I think the reality is, like, no, I think the process, particularly with long form writing, particularly with novels, is there's a process of exploration of reality that's absolutely essential to the survival of the species. And if we ever lose track of that, if we're just kind of writing for the sake of writing an interesting story, or for the sake, like, art for art's sake, I feel like I just I don't agree with that. Like, I think that there's a purpose to it, and I think the purpose is has to do with something with what it means to be a human being, and promoting the survival of, not just those who have a will to survive and who have dominance, but survival of people who are at the margins, and people whose stories may not be fully understood. I think that's a big part of why we write. Um, so I'm climbing down off my soapbox, but I'm saying I just want to make a really strong case for, like, the hero's journey is a real thing. It is something that we can all engage with every moment of our lives. And so it's important. One of the important things about it is to place it in dialogue with something else. It cannot stand alone. The idea of a hero standing alone is a very, very American heresy, and it is not the reality of what a hero is at all. And so, one of the ways that we express that in writing is by taking the major plot and giving it some kind of something to brush up against. So it could be a subplot, it could be a romantic subplot, or it could just be a body of knowledge. And that's the way I've approached it. Is, as I'm outlining, as I'm considering things, I'm also considering, like, what should I place this in dialogue with. Um, so, Adrian, in Crow's Head, we've got the major story, which is one about um, a man who's a counterfeiter, and some strange stuff is happening. And really, he's just trying to make sure he can continue his business, um, while he's having his loneliness is so incredibly overpowering. He has this encounter with this woman, and without giving away too much of the plot, um, that relationship becomes very important to him. But then all of that story is placed in dialogue with something wildly different than that, right? Um, Particularly, and you know more about it than I do, but something alchemical, right? I'll leave it at that. So, where at what point in the process did you say, okay, I want to have this story about this counterfeiter going on, and over here this story about these alchemists? At what point did you, because those are two different things in my mind. Um, where did you start to think about, was it from the very beginning? or was there an aha moment?
Well, yeah, so the very beginning really started with the chemical wedding, and I just started to think about like I knew that I wanted to tell like a contemporary, like modern kind of retelling of the chemical wedding. And I was thinking about alchemy and kind of popular conceptions of what alchemy is, which is,
Mm,
like turning base metals into gold. And I thought, what could I do that is kind of like that? And a counterfeiter came right to my mind. Like my alchemist could be a counterfeiter because it kind of commits all the same sins as an
mm,
alchemist. An alchemist was taking kind of base metals and trying to make them into gold. And a counterfeiter is taking like paper and ink and trying to turn it into currency. Um, and that's really where that started. But so much of what you said is really I agree with about the hero journey. That like a hero that is just kind of in it for himself is not a hero. The whole
mm,
point of being the hero is the act, and any act of heroism is an act of self-sacrifice.
mm,
In order to
mm,
be a hero, you have to be putting your own needs and your own desires secondary to something that you think is greater than yourself and more important than yourself.
mm.
Um, but isn't that a human life? Like, isn't that what we all, especially I think as you kind of like grow and age, you start to understand more and more that your life is in relationship with other lives, and that the best thing you can do is be in service to them.
I think some people do and some people don't. I mean, I think there's a tension inside of us where we just kind of want to walk away from it all, right? Um, to commit the
Yeah, I
heroic
completely
a
agree with
heroic
that. But
act of selfishness, versus a heroic act for the community. And so there's a tension there, I think. But I think some
I'm
of us grow in a
the
deeper
heroic
appreciation.
act of selfishness is not a heroic act.
Yeah, but it feels that way. It can feel that way, right? Um, yeah, I think about the Nathaniel Hawthorne story, Whitfield, where the man just kind of walks away from it all, you know, and then comes back. I think that's the one. He kind of goes back and looks at his family and how they're better without him. I think that's an American myth that we all think about walking away from it all. Um, uh, I always think about that Neil Young song, like somewhere on a desert highway, she rides a Harley Davidson, her long blonde hair flying in the breeze. Like that idea of this somewhere out in the desert, there's these people who are just kind of doing their thing, you know. And I think we can all kind of buy into that heroic act of selfishness thing. But and I think that's the seduction of passive media, like frankly binge watching TV. I think that is a heroic act of selfishness that it's appealing to. Um, versus I think and so it's one of the limitations of that media versus with books, the hope would be that this is drawing us to contemplation and that's not just purely selfish. But there are moments like Dungeon Crawler Carl where I am reading just purely for escapism. Um, but yeah, I love what you said. I think Isaac Newton would slap you upside the head for saying that an alchemist is a counterfeiter. But I hear what you're saying. So so just to under in layman's terms, chemical wedding is an actual document uh, purporting to have alchemical recipes or something in it. Um, and you took this document and basically contemporized it. I'm dumbing it down, but you brought it into a contemporary situation and said, what if this was happening in someone's life right now?
Yeah, the chemical wedding is an alchemical allegory. It's an
Yeah.
allegory. It's meant to be kind of a phantasmagoria, and
Mhm.
it reads like a fever dream.
Yeah.
It reads like something written by Jean Genet.
Yeah.
It does unless you understand what it is kind of symbolic of, it doesn't make any sense. But it's very kind of richly symbol, like the symbolism and the kind of the imagery of it is very compelling. But you
Hmm.
don't really understand what the hell is going on unless you understand kind of what it that it's an alchemical allegory, you know.
Hmm.
It just really grabbed my imagination, and I wanted to like tell a version of it that made sense to like an actual lived human life.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, I think it's important for us, like when we get into these projects, not to just think we're going out into the woods ourselves. Like you have this tether that you can kind of look back to and draw inspiration from, but it's not in any way limiting. You know what I mean? Like you have your own thing that you're going to say, but this thing has its thing that it's going to say, and you're going to create space for a dialogue. For me, with the X-ray tech books, it was really purely like the hero's journey, like find the sword, the elixir, who's the goddess, who's the mentor, what happens in the cave. Like it was all those steps of the hero's journey, like page by page. Um, but it was up against this other body of knowledge that had to do with what you need to know your first day as an X-ray tech, which is called the content. It's the AR, the American Registry of Radiologic Technologists Content Specifications, and it's this
Okay.
big um, test prep document. Like it's like how it was like one of those like how to study for the GRE kind of things. And I was just like, because I think you could literally take the hero's journey and put it next to like a GRE prep book, and you would get a decent story. Like there would be a dialogue there between this incredibly dry piece of nonfiction reference material and the wild wooliness of the hero's journey. And so I kind of like that frisson. I like that high contrast of like take a completely dry technical document and set it up against this other thing. And I think one of the books that kind of first made me think about that was The Martian by Andy Weir. I
Yeah,
remember
that's a good one.
reading that book and just loving, and it was initially it was an independently published book. I mean, all props to him for just kind of championing it, because it's the kind of book that like and when it came out, I can imagine a lot of the sci-fi houses kind of turning up their nose at it. Um, but it's a great book, and part of its greatness is like its insistence on hard science, and then it's got
Right,
this really
that's what I was going to
voicey
say is
character.
the thing that he's putting that in relationship with is just the scientific method.
Yeah, it's
Just
like
this like
botany.
hard testing of every kind of assumption, every kind of like what can fix this like dire problem that I'm
Yeah,
in, you know.
yeah, and so I think it's
Systematically test it and like figure out what will keep me alive and what will make me dead.
yeah,
It it is a story about the worth of the scientific method. Like it's a good method, you know, to use. That's the moral of the story.
yeah,
Like,
is like try science,
but
falsifiability,
also it is,
reproducibility. Yeah,
but it's taking a human being and putting them in a situation like it's doing all the kind of normal things that when you think about story and what story should do, it's also doing all those things. It
hold on
takes
for
a
just a sec.
person
I
and it
just
puts them
realized
in
my
a
computer's
situation.
unplugged. keep talking because I gotta go down here and plug in my computer.
Okay. Yeah, it takes a person and puts them in a situation that they have to solve. And the story is kind of like how they go about trying to solve it. That's every story.
I think one of the
You
points we're
take a
kind of
person, you put them in a situation. Sorry, what were you saying?
I think like one of the things we're kind of like orbiting around tonight, and this has been a heroic act, even just recording this. I just realized the whole issue, the whole technical issue was my laptop wasn't plugged in. Um, but like the so people say write what you know, right? Which I kind of base level I'm suspicious of that. Um, because I think very few people in our society and our culture think of themselves as being heroes. So if you do not believe, if you
But
have
there
no
are like
experience,
being a human being
yes,
is a heroic act. Like unless you just like sell out and give up. I mean, as long as you haven't given up, you're doing a heroic thing.
I agree. I agree.
Even if
But
you
I think
don't
there's
know,
a lot
even
of
if
people
you're
who
like a
don't.
total hot mess, you have no idea what you're doing, but you haven't given up. That's
Yeah,
heroic.
yeah. I would say that is the existential hero. I would agree. But so if you know that, great. Now place that in dialogue with some other body of knowledge, whether it's your knowledge of potato farming like The Martian, right, or your knowledge of being an x-ray tech, or your knowledge of weird alchemical texts, right, and then you've got something like then
Okay.
you
Yeah.
now you're really cooking. You get what I'm saying? Like I think it's really just as simple as that.
Yes, because it has to be embedded in a real experience of what it means to be a human being.
Yeah, yeah. And well, that's it for tonight. Next Thursday, so this Thursday coming up, um, we're gonna be talking about the swamp, and I feel like this is gonna be pretty
I'm looking
timely.
forward to it. The swamp is one of my favorite things to talk about.
Oh, it's one of my
What
least
you mean?
favorite
What
things.
you mean by the swamp? You mean like the messy middle, like
Yeah,
when
the
the
messy
work gets
middle.
hard,
Yeah, I feel like I'm there all the
when
time.
like the muse isn't talking to you, and now it's just hard work, and you've got to push every day to get to like the next scene.
Adrian's, you're channeling your inner like death metal guitarist right now.
Am I?
Yeah,
Was it the head?
you're
Was it
gonna
my
like it.
head
It's gonna be brutal, and
singing?
you'll like it.
It is brutal. Yes, yes, it is brutal, and
Yeah.
I mean, I don't really like going through it. I go through it the same as anybody else does. I don't really like the experience of it, but I do kind of like talking about it because it teaches
I
you a lot
always
about
feel
what it
like
means to be a human being.
it to me, like, all right, we'll leave a lot of this for Thursday, but I always feel like it starts out like writing a novel starts out like follow the yellow brick road. Like this sounds great. This sounds awesome. I'm leaving the
Yeah,
candy
yeah, that's a
kingdom
good
and we're
analogy.
skipping along. It's great.
Right.
Everything's happy. I got these cool
With
shoes
like
on.
Munchkin singing you a song. Yeah.
And then it's like not only did you like fall asleep in the enchanted field or whatever, now you're like in Return to Oz where you're being chased by psychos on rollerblades. Like it just gets worse and worse and worse until like the writing process is over, and then it's like I feel like I have postpartum depression. That's the way it
And
feels.
those munchkins that were like cheering you on at the beginning, they have found something better to do.
Yeah, they're monkeys
I
now.
was gonna swear. I'm trying not to swear, but
Yeah, no,
they have effed off. You know, like
those actors got recast as the flying monkeys. Um,
yeah, they have abandoned you. So
mhm. Well, yeah, that's the fun stuff we're talking about Thursday. And it's not a like how to get through the swamp. I don't think there is, except for like you're saying, I can't go on, I'll go on. But it's more just like, what is this thing? Why does it exist? And I'm not really interested in what are you going to do about it. It's just like acknowledge the reality of it.
I
So
think what is this and why does it exist is probably the best angle to come at it from.
yeah, I
Because
mean,
in a more practical way, I don't have anything to say that people have not heard a
yeah,
thousand times. Like it's easy to say and hard to do, you know.
yeah.
You already
So
know the answer to how to do it. It's just hard to do.
yeah, so that's what we'll talk about Thursday. Until then, good night and God bless.
Yeah.